Phew! Here we are again at last. I haven't made a video for a while because various things, basically life gets in the way. You know, I've just been busy doing other stuff, one thing and another, and time's flown. Anyway, phew, we're back at last and getting on with the job. And what we're doing today is we're going to dismantle the rest of the gearbox. So that means taking the inner cover off and then removing the internals of the gearbox. Right, so removing the inner gearbox cover, we've got some weird screws. We've got a weird collection. We've got a large Allen screw there. We've got a Phillips or crosshead rather screw there. We've got an external small Allen key there, and we've got a nut, a bolt there, a stud. I'm just double checking to see if I've forgotten one, but I don't think I have. I'm just going to remove what we've got. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to remove those 4. I'm still double checking I haven't forgotten one, but I'm fairly sure I haven't. And then we should be able to pull the gearbox off, inner cover off. It should come off quite easily, because you know we can get behind it and give it a whack. So you know it should be fairly straightforward. We'll put a drip tray underneath because again, you can see how the oil would have sat in there and can't get to the drain plug when we remove the outer cover. Well, I think there's still some oil in there as well. There's some pockets of oil, so when we take the inner cover off it might get a few drips. So again, I'm going to put a little drip tray underneath that, but I'm going to get the old mega blaster and remove those 4 with an assortment of heads. We've got that, we'll need a socket, and we'll need a bigger, I think that's a bigger Allen key, yeah. So that's still too small. Yeah, I might have to use a manual on that. I don't know if I've got one. I don't know if I've got a hex the right size for that. I'll have a look. Maybe that's right. That's even bigger. I'll have a look. I'll search. I'll have to use. I've got 110 manual hex keys, so I might use those. If I can't find one to fit the Mega Blaster, then I'll just use a manual hex. All right, let's get going anyway on that. Okay, so I've assembled the various tools that I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this hex, which is pretty tight. So I'm going to give it a little whack. There it goes. And it might be loose enough to do on the hand. Yeah, okay, on that one. So that's loose. Then what we're going to do, I think we're going to do this crosshead screw that. Phaser on medium, I think. Phaser on medium. And it goes. Then a small hex bolt outside at the bottom. And then lastly, this exterior stud under there. I don't know if you can see that, but there is one. Okie coke. There we go. Not put my gloves on, don't know why. Getting a bit oily. I better put my gloves on. Obviously I've been away for a couple of weeks, away from the workbench for a couple of weeks, I'm already forgetting things. Right, so double check, yeah, we've got everything out. What I might do, actually, I'm going to remove this cover, which is a little chrome cover for the alternator lead. Okay, which I should have done ages ago really, but it's just in the way. So there we go. Let's see if that'll, well, it won't come out now. See how it's gone. I'm actually surprised at this because this has actually got, this is actually a T150 kind of gearbox. Well, I know because it is a T150, but because this is a very late engine, often the late engines had the gearbox, the inner gearbox cover from is it the inner gearbox from the T160? So it had the, is that the inner gearbox or the outer gearbox? Just have a look, just hang on a minute. Yeah, the inner gearbox from a T160, a lot of these late T150 engines, and so that sort of chrome bit doesn't fit because there's like a dipstick that goes there on the T160. Now, and I'm surprised because this is obviously a late engine. Two things, it's got the later tappets for a T160, and it's also got ball capped rockers on the top of the push rods, on the valves, which are also a T160 sort of item. So this is obviously a very late engine, so I'm surprised it's not also got a late inner gearbox cover, but it's not. Right, okie coke. Yeah, so I've got bolt studs there, but they're to hold the crankcase together. I've removed that, I'm just still surprised with myself. There's only 4 bolts on the inner cover in, but I think that's right because of course these two go all the way through, and that one goes all the way through. So there's 3 on the outer cover that actually hold the inner cover in as well. That makes sense. So there's actually 7. Right. Okay, let's give this a little tap. Put on drip tray. Yeah. Have I forgotten something? Because it's not coming apart. Right, what have I forgotten? Give it another little tap, but I'm surprised it's not. Doesn't seem to be moving. That's going. There it is. It just didn't want to go, but it is going now. It can jam on these studs. These 2 studs in particular. A bit of oil. The main shaft. I just keeping the main shaft in. I don't really want it to come out with the outer, otherwise all the gears fall out. So I'm just tap the main shaft back in so it doesn't come out with the outer cover, or inner cover rather. Get thee back there, main shaft. There we go. And that's the inner cover off. I'm holding it there because I'm trying to catch the oil, and that's what's called the butterfly quadrant. I think you can probably see from the shape why it's called a butterfly quadrant, because obviously it looks like butterfly wings, and it's this butterfly quadrant. That's what the gear lever acts on, and then the other end has teeth, and that acts on this what's it called? Oh, blimey, I forgot the name of it. It's a big circular thing anyway, which has got teeth in there, and that blimey, I've forgotten the name of it. Anyway, the end of the butterfly quadrant goes on these teeth and turns the cam plate. That's the word I'm looking for. The cam plate round. The cam plate then moves the selector forks, and that's what changes the gears. Okay. Oh no, there's one thing I forgot to mention that I did off camera before. Damn. And I've just seen that, and that's just reminded me. Right, because what we got there is a thrust washer on the end of the Layshaft, and this thrust washer here goes on this little, see that peg there? I think you can see it. It's pegged there, and there's a hole in the thrust washer, and that sits on there and goes, and then that peg goes on there, and then the thrust washer sits round a little needle roller bearing, which itself is deliberately sits proud of the casing and holds the thrust washer. Now, I forgot to do this off camera before I started this. What I did was I checked the end float on the Layshaft. So when this cover is on that way up, we just had the nose of the Layshaft. This is the main shaft, this is the Layshaft. We had the nose of the Layshaft just sticking out, and what I did was I put my big, I don't know if it'll work now, I put my big magnet, take the gloves off a minute. Yeah, the gloves are off. Yeah, I put my big magnetic telescopic thing on the end of the Layshaft, and what I did was, what's that gone? Oh, that's the thrust washer, it's okay. I pulled it in and out with the cover on, but what I did was I pulled and pushed the Layshaft to see how much end float there was, how much it moved in and out. And when I did it before, it moved about 10-15 thou, which I'd say is about the perfect end float. Because what can happen is there can be a huge amount of end float on this. You can buy thicker thrust washers just to control that end float. Now when I did it on my one, I rang P&M specialist triple dealers, and they said, right, you just need a thicker one on this end, which is what I did, and that sorted out the end float. Now my gearbox now works better. I'm not really sure that it's due to the end float. There were other problems with it, and I would not take my gearbox apart just because I had too much end float or whatever on the Layshaft. But if you are taking the gearbox apart, then it's worth, you might as well sort the end float out and get it to about 10-15 thou, which is what it's supposed to be. I think on mine, before I did it, it was literally about 30-40 thou, or even more, about 40 thou anyway, end float on my old gearbox, and so it definitely benefited from having thicker thrust washers. But this one, I tested it earlier with the magnet before I took the cover off. Anyway, worth checking before you take the inner cover off. Check that end float, and then if you think you need a thicker thrust washer, you can get one. Okay, right. Anyway, where were we? Yeah, so that's the inner cover off, and we'll be checking these bearings, but I'm not going to take them out. I'm not going to necessarily take everything apart in this particular rebuild. If it looks okay, if the bearing feels okay, it's going to stay there. We're just going to clean up the cases. It's a mechanical rebuild. And you know, often if I do a rebuild, I'll replace a bearing as a matter of course. That's not happening this time. I'm only replacing bearings and things if they really need it. And the gearbox looks okay to me. Well, so far. I mean, that bearing looks okay. The quadrant looks okay. Sometimes these teeth can get worn. What we might do is replace some of the springs in the outer cover. We'll come to that when we come to rebuild the gearbox, because there's some springs there that control the gear lever, and they wear with time, they lose their tension, and the gear lever literally gets sloppy. So we'll have a look at those. But the main parts of the gearbox, I think we're okay. Right. But obviously we haven't looked at the dogs and things yet. Right, I haven't got a towel down. What's going on? No towel down. Getting mess all over the bench. Right. Here comes the towel. I'll take the gearbox out of the way for now. Take those out of the way. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start taking the gears off. Now what I do is I take them off and I put them down on the bench in a particular order. Can we see this on the bench? Maybe not. Need to go a bit lower. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to remember what's coming off. So I'll do Layshaft. So take off that dog, and then there's a circlip. Yeah, and we need to get that circlip off before any of the other gears will come off. Okay, so see if I can find my a pair of circlip removers that will actually work. They should work if they're small enough to go in the eyes. They are. So that's a circlip on the Layshaft. So what I do is I put things down on the bench and I put them down in order and I put them facing upwards or inwards. So I know that that goes on the end and it goes that way up. So let's have a look. I've got to take the dog off next. Right, okay. So I'm pulling out the, this is the fork, the selector shaft. Okay, selector shaft comes out and they hold the selectors. So now that selector can come out. So then hopefully, there we go. It's coming out. Woo! We've got the 2 gears coming out there. So I think that's first and second. Okay, I'm putting them down on the bench in order. Now, what they do tend to have, they do tend to have the part number stamped on them, which is great. So if you get lost and think, hang on, which gear is that? Hang on, what there? Yeah, then you've got your part number. So this one is, so I think it's first gear. That's 874655. Okay, yeah. Right, and then we've got first and second gear on the main shaft. Then we've got third gear on the main shaft. So take the next fork out, and we've got that third gear I think on the Layshaft. I think that is. And we've got the last dog. There's the last dog. Fork. And then we've got the main shaft coming out, complete with fourth gear. And that's the Gearbox main shaft. It's all looking good. I'll put that on the Layshaft. That goes on the main shaft. Main shaft bit. That's the Layshaft. Main shaft. Then I take out the right. So then out comes the rest of the Layshaft. Yeah, there's the thrust washer on the other end of the Layshaft, which goes around the needle bearing. Can we see in there? There's another needle roller bearing in there, which again sits slightly proud. Look at that. It's not been inserted properly. That. How many times do you see that? So again, that needle roller bearing should sit slightly proud of the casing, as it does for this needle roller bearing. You see it sits slightly proud of the casing, and so that means the thrust washer can sit on and sit around, and it uses that bearing to sit on. Now they've inserted that bearing too deep, and so what would have been happening is this thrust washer would have been spinning almost certainly, because it's got nothing to sit against. So we'll have to take that one. Oh, this is a pain in the backside. We'll have to take that bearing out, that needle roller bearing, and put a new one in, and insert it properly, slightly proud of the casing, so that the thrust washer can sit around. It just sits very slightly proud. It's in the manual, I can't remember, but basically half the depth of the thrust washer, so it's just enough to hold the thrust washer in place, but without sitting beyond it, which obviously then the Layshaft to be sitting on the bearing, not on the thrust washer. Okay, so there we've got that, and then we've got the high gear or fifth gear on the main shaft. So that's the fifth gear. So we've got first, second, third, fourth, fifth. First, second, third, and then fourth and fifth are always together. They stay on the Layshaft. And just make sure that that fourth gear spins freely and it's not interfering with the fifth gear, which is very important. Okay, and we're going to check all the teeth and that for wear. There seems to be absolutely no wear on these teeth that I can see at first inspection at all. They all look absolutely perfect. Right, let's have a look. Then out comes the cam plate itself. Just pulls out. and that looks perfect. Okay, what we're looking for any signs of wear on the cam plate, and this is where the selectors, that's the wrong one, the selectors go in those grooves. Can't see any sign of wear there. We're looking for signs of wear on the actual selector forks, on these faces. Let's have a look. No, that's okay. And there's no wear on the front. Let's give it a cursory inspection. We'll inspect them properly later on. No wear. I can't see any appreciable wear. There's maybe a little bit of wear on this one. It might be worth changing that fork. A little bit of wear on this edge. That front edge has got a slight lip on it, so we might change that fork. But okay. Now this, do you remember me saying that there was this long thing with a spigot in it? That's it. I don't know, it won't come out because of the suction of the oil. It's just come out now. So there's a spring-loaded like spigot that sits in there, and that runs around the edge, and then when you change gear, it like sticks in and holds it in gear. Change gear, and it holds again. So that's what makes your gear change nice and positive. We might change this for, we will change it for a different plunger it's called. I said spigot, it's a plunger with a bull, like a bull tip, like on a ballpoint pen, which David Drew supplies, and so we'll be getting one of those if he's got any in stock. They're just, because it's a roller, it can just make that gear change a bit smoother, so it rolls around the edge rather than sort of just scrapes around the edge. Okay, but the gearbox is now dismantled. I've just got to take the oil seal. There's an oil seal at the back here, where just behind the sprocket. We'll look at that perhaps later on. I've just got to take that off of that side. I've got to turn the engine around. You can see we've still got a fair bit of oil sitting in the bottom of the gearbox. We'll get rid of that. We've got, I don't know, can you see the actual main, the main roller bearing at the back there? That's what the high gear runs on, and we've got needle rollers inside the high gear. That feels fine. There's two. They both feel fine. There's also an oil seal. We're changing all the oil seals for definite, no matter what. The oil seals get changed. All the oil seals on the engine are changed. But those needle roller bearings feel fine. And the main bearing at the back feels, main roller bearing for the main shaft feels fine. We're going to have to replace this damn needle roller bearing, even though it's okay. It needs to sit out. And I think, because it's been in so long, if I try and tap it out, I will try and tap it into more position, it'll probably damage it, because they're actually easily damaged. They're only like thin metal that they're made of. So I think we've probably got, I think we're going to have to replace that and get it to sit in the right place. But we'll probably replace that. I think we might replace one of these forks. It's a bit worn. And I think that'll be it. We'll put a new plunger on. Everything else seems to be pretty perfect. So it's no wear at all, really. Right, so that's it for now. That's the gearbox dismantled. I'm going to take some photos of all the stuff on the bench. I do this every time. Can we see? I don't know if we can see that properly. I'm using the tripod with very oily hands. But everything's there, and no matter how many times I do it, because it's like a few months or a year between each time I do a gearbox, no matter how many do I think, hang on, does that go on first? Which way around does that go? Is that on the Layshaft or is that on the main shaft? So I'm going to take a few pictures of everything in order, and so that will hopefully aid us getting everything back together again in the right order. But obviously we've got the manual and the workshop manual and so on, which shows the order that they go back in as well. But that's what we're going to be doing. Right, so I'll take some photos of that and then bag and tag everything, and that's the gearbox dismantled. We're not going to be, whoops, then you fell over there. We're not going to be replacing the main bearing. I think that's fine, but we'll replace the oil seal at the back of the main bearing. I'll get rid of that oil, and then our next job will be to dismantle the timing case, our last job before we actually split the crankcases. Woohoo! Oh, we've got the oil filter to come out as well. But that's it for now. And there we go. Job done.